Iconic sports imagery. Muhammad Ali, 23 years old, standing over the once seemingly unconquerable legend Sonny Liston, looking fierce. It sums up so much of Ali's cocky, brash attitude. It's like he's saying, I dare you to get off that canvas. I double dare you, motherfucker. The spirit of the young man captured in a perfectly timed photo. If you've watched a couple of my videos, you're very familiar with my favorite combat sports image. It's this photo from the Bigfoot hunt fight. It's just an incredible graphic depiction of the brutality of the sport. You know, you can put so many different spins on MMA. The noble, honorable martial arts element. The cerebral, Rogan calls it high-level problem-solving with dire physical consequences. Great phrase, rolls right off the tongue. But sometimes you see an image like this, and it reduces the whole thing to gratuitous cage violence. The elbow frozen in Bigfoot's orbital, both men drenched in blood. Mark Hunt's hair dyed red from the battle. Nobody got out unscathed. Even the faces on Bigfoot's shoulder are bloodied. It looked like Hunt's tattoos beat the out of Bigfoot's tattoos. The photo was taken at the perfect instant to catch the droplets of blood spraying off Bigfoot, caught in midair. If there was ever a matchup that epitomized the unbreakable spirit of a warrior, it's this one. Hunt landed shots that would have knocked out a horse. Bigfoot had some wicked flurries and devastating ground and pound. Mark eventually carved him open like a Christmas turkey, and they finished the fight in each other's bloody arms, exhausted. My favorite heavyweight fight ever. I mentioned in my last video that Hunt was raised in a sick, twisted house of horrors. As I said, the motherfucker was forged in the fires of hell. And in his career, he has revisited the unforgiving fires of hell many, many times. Just like the Ali image, this is Hunt, the spirit of the man captured in a perfectly timed photo. Throughout his long career, Mark has been both the crushing hammer and the unbreakable anvil. We've all seen the clip from his K1 days where Mark stood in front of a 250-pound power-punching Super Samoan mirror image of himself, Ray Cepho, and proceeded to play rope-a-dope with his face. It was fights like this gave Hunt the reputation as being both one of the hardest hitters and toughest motherfuckers in the sport. But what's truly shocking is that 15 years after a fight like this, Hunt set the record for the most punches absorbed in a single fight. And he didn't do that against Nate Diaz. He did so against the current power-punching heavyweight champion. 15 years later. An astonishing testament to the durability and resiliency of Mark Hunt. He is a man uniquely built for his profession as a fighter. The Super Samoan is a combat sports legend and a warrior in the truest sense of the word. But against Father Time, nobody gets the W. Mark is 43 years old, and his chin is not what it used to be. It was first cracked by Manhoof, but it was Junior opened the floodgates in the UFC. And in the space of 4 years, Hunt's been stopped or unconscious 4 times. I already discussed the ominous early warning signs Hunt outlined in his interview for The Voice. My body is I don't sleep well. You can hear me starting to stutter and slur my words. My memory is not that good anymore. I'll forget something I did yesterday. The UFC responded by pulling him off the card, which prompted the insult-laden Instagram tirade I discussed in that video. But when Dana responded, it wasn't to return serve as we might have expected. He was, in my opinion, the voice of reason and prudence. Sometimes you gotta protect these fighters from themselves, and that's what we're looking into right now. You know, there's a school of thought that says Hunt's a warrior. He should be allowed to dictate the end of his own career, go out in his shield if he so chooses. But if these symptoms are serious and traumatic brain injury deteriorate into future debilitating conditions, then there's every chance Hunt himself will look back in the future and admit, you know what? Unfortunately, Dana White was right. In 1950, Chris and Angelo Dundee opened the now famous 5th Street Gym in Miami, Florida. It was a gym that would become a boxing mecca, cultivating Hall of Famers like Sugar Ray Leonard and Carmen Basilio. In the early 60s, Chris asked a local doctor, Ferdie Pacheco, to take a look at some of his fighters. Ferdie quickly became a permanent fixture in the gym, selflessly offering up his services to fighters free of charge.
As boxing history has unfolded over the past 3 decades, one man has been there both to witness and be a part of both the highs and lows of the sport, Dr. Ferdie Pacheco. Dubbed the Fight Doctor, Pacheco worked in the corner of a dozen championship fighters. But before he ever stepped foot in a boxing ring, Pacheco was making a difference in South Florida, practicing as a physician in Overtown, providing medical care to those people most in need. In 1960, he began treating the boxers at Miami Beach's historic 5th Street Gym, but he never charged a fighter or a manager for his services.
He loved boxing. I mean, Ferdie used to come up to the gym all the time, and the fighters got to know the guy naturally, and then he was nice enough to offer his medical services.
In those days, every kid who boxed can go to his office, and they were minority kids, and get free treatment. I would say pro bono free. 90% of those guys got stitches, got tonsillectomies, got things done, always free.
I don't know if I did him a favor, because the fighters would go there, he would take care of the fighters, but then lo and behold, they were walking with their kids, with their mother-in-law, their cousins, and Ferdie was taking care of all of them.
Ferdie was a breath of fresh air in those days because he was an articulate, well-educated man who was not a boxer and hadn't come from within boxing, but he came from treating boxers, and that gave him a lot of insight into what happens.
It was in the 5th Street Gym that Ferdie met the young Cassius Clay, and a bond developed between two big talkers.
One day, Cassius Clay walked into the 5th Street Gym, and you know, that the rest was history.
When Muhammad came in, he fit right into the scene. He jumped up on the steps, he said, "You get all your bums ready, I'm going to knock them all out today."
He came in. Wow, I said, look at this guy. He was like 17 or 18. I said, if there's ever a perfect human being in the world, that's the guy. At 17 or 18, he was a god. Looked at this guy, I said, he's big, tall, and he can talk.
Ferdie fit very well into that loudmouth scene because they had a hard time shutting him up because he was always talking, and Ali was always shouting. So it was a fun time.
Pacheco was right there, hollering, screaming, had a way of making everybody laugh.
He was almost a mirror of Ali in that they were both so outrageous in the way they carried on, outrageous in the way they talked. They were fascinating people.
Ferdie became Ali's physician, trusted friend and advisor, and even worked Ali's corner. Ferdie loved Ali, and it's clear Ali had great reverence and respect for the expertise of the Fight Doctor.
So great, I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest.
For 15 years, Pacheco was at the side of Muhammad Ali, as the fighter known as the greatest changed the face of boxing forever.
He's a great man. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be the fighter that I am today. And not only that, I'm sure God's going to bless him because he works with nothing in return. He don't know what I'm saying. He didn't tell me what to say. And he is the greatest of all time.
Angelo would listen very carefully to anything that Ferdie said, and then a lot of times he'd sort of look over at Ali to see what Ali's reaction was, because believe me, Ali, even though when he was a kid, was the boss, but he had I guess a combination of adoration and awe of Pacheco. So he would always sort of, look at him like this, as, like, are you for real, man? Are you for real, Doc?
Ferdie was in Ali's camp for the better part of 2 decades. He was with him before he shocked the world, stopping Sonny Liston to become the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. He was with him when he regained his belt in a historic Foreman fight in Zaire. And he was with him for part of that final phase of his career when Ali's legs were gone, his reflexes weren't what they used to be, and Ali got by on cunning and regrettably on toughness as much as athletic ability. The past his prime, already punchy Ali accumulated massive damage at the end of his career. No fight worse than the infamous Thrilla in Manila.
September 1975, a year after the rumble in the jungle, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were limbering up for their third and final battle, the Thrilla in Manila. Each had already beaten the other.
Me, my left hook's in shape. I think I get this man. I'm pretty fast. Yeah, this, maybe, you know what I mean?
No, man. But when you see me out there this time, you'll believe that age doesn't matter in nobody's case.
I'm not saying you old.
All right.
I'm not saying you going your age.
I'm going to be out there every second smoking, Jack. Every second.
You going to be smoking, and I ain't going to be joking.
Sure
I'm going to be packing and poking, pouring water on your smoking.
You can't have it.
And this might shock,
don't never die.
This might shock and amaze you, but I'm going to retire Joe Frazier. Let me tell you something, boy. Somebody told me you got, I said, Roy.
Yeah, the guy had charisma coming out his ears. And this clip of him trash talking here, that was 1975. It's worth noting how quick-witted and animated he was at this point. This fight would become one of the greatest fights of all time, and unfortunately, one of the most punishing.
The whole world wants to see what's going to happen. Manila was hot, dry, you know. It's probably like 200 degrees in the ring or more. But it really was a hard fight.
That was the hardest fight I ever saw. And that was the one I disliked most because it was too hard. And when you've got two men of 15, 16 stone knocking each other about for 14 rounds, you know, they are shipping a lot of punishment.
220 pounds.
I was like, Daddy, stop hitting him. I actually felt sorry for Joe Frazier. I felt bad for him. I was like, stop, you're going to kill him. My dad's going to kill somebody, you know. And it was really weird. That was the first fight where I felt like that.
I think the 14th round was as close to death as you can get in the ring and not kill somebody. Had Frazier come out for the 15th, I think we'd have had a fatality.
And somebody in that corner wants to stop the fight. Somebody in Frazier's corner is saying he ought to be stopped. They're arguing about it. And Eddie Futch is calling it off. He's calling it off. It's all over, and Muhammad Ali at the end of the 14th round is a TKO. He did it in the end, the hardest fight of his life.
I was just dead. I was beat. I did the 3 minutes every round.
That was too hard a fight, and it was the point at which he should have said, that's it, I've beat my old enemy, Joe Frazier. It was the third fight they'd had. And now's the time to call it a day, I would have said.
After that grueling war, Ferdie said the following. That night, Ali looked me in the eye and told me, I almost died. At a reception of the Filipino president Ferdinand Marcos, Ali later signed the visitor book with the words, death is so near, and time for friendly action is so limited. Love and peace always. But despite this fight and the clear signs Ali was entering dangerous territory from a health perspective, he refused to hang up the gloves. Ferdie, who could see the writing on the wall, begged Ali to quit boxing. But Ali's entourage had attracted a number of unscrupulous motherfuckers who were looking after their own interests above the health and safety of Ali.
Muhammad Ali has the greatest, well, the largest entourage of any fighter who ever stepped into the ring, exceeding even Sugar Ray Robinson, who traveled around the globe with a half-dozen pals on his personal payroll, including a barber.
Well, he was bright and he understood money, but he was a little naive. He would tend to believe what people said to him. And everybody always had a scheme, you know, and it was usually a get-rich-quick scheme. I remember somebody came to him and wanted to build a car and call it the Ali. And I said, Ali, do you have any idea what kind of money it costs to get into the automobile business? I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. No, it'll be okay. He can do it.
I remember one little guy had nothing to offer in the camp at all as far as training or any kind of work he could do, but Ali just liked him. He just came out of nowhere and he got into entourage, got paid. See, Ali used to pay you every week, plus a bonus after each fight.
These people that say that Ali should have stopped, I say they're right, but I didn't have that authority over Ali that they fought. Ali was always his own man, and if I didn't do it, he would have did it himself or got somebody else to do it.
Herbert, you know, he played the game of sounding like he wanted him to quit, but while making, I mean, that was his only way to make a living, and he was really, those guys really dug into him deep. You know, Don King took a nick, but these guys made it a career.
You know, I would say, so when are you going to quit? You know, so you're retiring for real this time? Come on, Daddy, you promised, you know. And I would always hear the people who worked for him, his trainers, managers, you can do it again, Ali.
This time, Norton will see I'm truly the most. And all this time, he's been chasing a ghost. There are two things that are hard to hit and see. That's the spooky ghost and Muhammad Ali. Hey!
As it turns out, Norton didn't have too many issues finding Ali. Muhammad took a ton of damage and a hugely controversial decision. His fight with Ernie Shavers was so punishing, Madison Square Garden encouraged him to retire and said they'd never offer to host another Ali fight. Finally, Ferdie Pacheco had no choice but to walk away from what he felt was exploitation and gross negligence from the boxing commissions. I begged Muhammad to leave boxing. He wouldn't, so in the end I left Muhammad. I knew the punishment he was taking was too much for any man, even him. I implored him, "You have to stop, champ." But Ali refused to quit boxing, so I quit Ali. It was the hardest decision of my life. Ferdie washed his hands of what he saw as the unconscionable exploitation of his old friend, and he tried to convince Ali's entourage to see sense.
You stopped being in his corner, I think, after the Ernie Shavers fight, did you not?
Yeah.
How did you convey that to Muhammad himself, that you were no longer going to be part?
I wrote letters to him, to his wife, who was really a caring, wonderful person and had some control over his life, to Herbert, and to Angelo, saying these are the findings that the New York doctor found. That tubule cells were in the urine, all kind of things were happening to him. My findings are that he's slipping neurologically more and more every fight. You can just listen to him talk. Look at the tape from one fight to the other. You can see his deterioration. And if you continue like this, you're going to have massive brain damage, which is going to lead to the other neurological disorders, either Parkinson's or midbrain damage, which is exactly like Parkinson's.
And what was the reaction to those letters?
Total and complete silence. I didn't hear from one person. Nada. Now, even Angelo, who was the godfather to my child, said, not a word. They were in a different business there, and they were in the business of keeping the golden goose alive.
If you start with a guy, you should finish with a guy. No.
But did you not think he was going on too long?
No, I'm a firm believer. And I'm a firm believer not playing God with an individual. Muhammad did what he wanted to do.
And there you have the two basic sides of the argument we still see today. Ferdie felt people should be protected. We should use the medical knowledge at our disposal to evaluate the risks and make informed decisions. But Angelo thought, no, you don't play God with another man's career. It's his decision. Obviously, I'm on the side of Ferdie, and in agreement with Dana on this issue. You know, you might say you can't stop a man from earning a living, but the better part of me wants to see these guys get out in one piece. I subscribe to that old cliche, your health is your wealth. And if you've ever seen someone's health hit the f***ing wall, you probably do too. By the way, one thing I should make clear, I could understand if some people think it's a little distasteful to juxtapose an active fighter like Mark with Ali, but I'm not putting him in the same stratosphere, thankfully. In reality, the only symptoms of brain injury I've seen from Hunt are the ones he's reported himself. I fully expect him to pass whatever medical scrutiny the UFC prescribe, and as he said himself, he already passed 2 health checks leading up to UFC Sydney, and one of those was with a neurosurgeon. I'm just using Hunt as an example because he's raised the issue and brought out what I feel is an appropriate response from Dana White, and a type of caution that might have given guys like Ali and Frazier the retirement they deserved. I'm not picking on Hunt or trying to frame him as a shot fighter. I don't think he is. But I do agree with the general policy implied by Dana's response, which would be to take those symptoms seriously. In 1980, Ali came out of retirement to face Larry Holmes after 2 years off. At this point, he was shot to slurring his speech like you wouldn't believe.
And I have to do it. That's why. I'm doing it because I'm not supposed to do it. Anything I'm not supposed to do, I do. It wasn't supposed to be a black Muslim in white America, I did. It wasn't supposed to tell Vietnam no, I did. Whatever I'm not supposed to do is what I go do. So I'm not supposed to do this, so I want to do it. Don't tell me I can't do it. Don't tell me it's impossible. Don't tell me I'm too old. Don't tell me I get hurt. I'll run to it to show you that I'm truly the greatest of all time. I'm greater than you people. You were a little boy when I was in England fighting in Cooper. Many of you out there watch this interview with kids. I'm still going. Can you believe it? Since 1964, since 1980, and I'm still raising hell? 1980, I'm on top. Can you believe it?
That was 1980. It's actually sad to see Ali trying to hit those same braggadocious notes. It just falls flat and serves to highlight his condition. There's no way that fight should have been sanctioned. The Nevada State Athletic Commission had a copy of his medical records, and some of their contents were a disgrace.
You should have never had that fight with Larry Holmes. That was the worst tragedy I have ever seen in boxing.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission had a copy prior to the fight of Ali's medical records from the Mayo Clinic. Those medical records showed that when Ali tried to touch his finger to the tip of his nose, he missed the target.
Couldn't touch his nose, and yet despite those findings, they still sanctioned a fight. And Ali took one more unnecessary beating at the end of his career.
He was humiliated, you know. This is the greatest fighter of our time being humiliated, and millions are watching that over television and closed circuit. That was humiliation is unbelievable.
The beating against Larry Holmes was just a horrible, horrible experience for him.
Disgusted, Ali's old friend Ferdie Pacheco wrote a brilliant article for the New York Times, outlining in incredibly simple terms the risks of an old battle-worn fighter with clear signs of brain damage stepping back into the ring. The article is called "Age is a Boxer's Natural Opponent." In it, he directly addressed a lot of the same questions Hunt's situation is raised 36 years later. When should a fighter retire? What dangers threaten an aging fighter? What are the effects of a long career? Why should a retired boxer stay retired? What can commissions and doctors do about fighters who can pass physical examinations but should not box in professional bouts? The simplest way of characterizing the aging process would have to be the loss of elasticity. With the loss of elasticity comes the concomitant loss of resiliency, the ability to bounce back, to recover from injury, whether by natural causes, illness, or trauma. All organ systems are affected by this progressive loss of resiliency, perhaps none more so than the brain and central nervous system. The rest of the body keeps a pace, but the brain does not regenerate itself, and injury done to these tissues, added to the normal aging, is multiplied, and the downhill course of aging is accelerated. For some, one bout, one beating, could have contributed to the combination of symptoms. In all, it is the same fatal mistake of helping Mother Nature along the downhill slide. Now, we all know the fate of Muhammad Ali. He was eventually confined to an almost immobile shell, a shadow of the all-time great athlete he once was. One of the things you always hear, though, is that Ali's disease wasn't related to his career. And I always remember thinking, yeah, I don't believe that. There doesn't really appear to be any medical consensus, but the most common expert opinion I can find online is that Ali had a genetic predisposition to Parkinson's, which was exacerbated by all the punishment. As Ferdie said, he was stepping on the gas pedal on the road to debilitation. A Harvard professor of neurology who met Ali several times called it bad luck on top of genetics. While the fight doctor admits there was a genetic predisposition at play, he doesn't feel his symptoms would have compounded the way they did if it wasn't for the beatings he took later in his career. Who knows? Ali may not have passed away now if he'd stopped when I asked. He may not have been trapped in a shell like he was for so many years. But in the end, it was Ali's life. The commissions and doctors ultimately overlooked the severity of his symptoms. They left it up to Ali. And like the warrior he was, he fought till the f***ing wheels came off. And sadly, the greatest heavyweight of all time became a cautionary tale. The last time Ali met Ferdie Pacheco was in 2012 at a commemoration of the famous 5th Street Gym. And as Pacheco tells it, Ali almost brought the good doctor to tears when he embraced him leaned in, and muttered the tragic words, "You was right."